In this video, I'm going to show you how I used to invest remotely and the steps that I went through to do that. There's a long-held myth in property that you have to invest in the area that you're closest to or that you live in, but this isn't true. And in this video, I'll be showing you why that's not true and how you can broaden out and get the benefits of investing elsewhere in the country, and you're not restricted to just investing where you live. Because the reason this is possible is because of essentially the internet, and the internet obviously brings interconnectedness and expands the UK as it does the globe to allow you to kind of access anything anywhere and utilize resources and tools that didn't exist before, and it just makes the whole kind of country and globe a lot smaller. So the first one is finding deals. Now I've covered this in depth in a previous video, so do go and check that out. So you can find deals remotely by simply going on to websites such as Zoopla, Rightmove, On the Market, and endlessly scrolling and analyzing potential deals on there. And the process of doing that is essentially understanding your area, understanding the price points, what is the kind of upper price points, so therefore you can spot where a property is potentially cheap, and then you can start to do more research into that, into why it's cheap, and then you potentially found yourself a deal. So you're trying to find deals where there's margins there, where there's some profit to be made. You're doing your comparable analysis to compare what that property could be worth after adding value, or whether buying it just below market value, and then you potentially found a deal. This is a time-consuming process. It's not something that can be done quickly, and it's one of those things you're going to need to do consistently as well to get the results, but it is still very much doable. So the next point is around due diligence. Now it's important to do due diligence before you do the viewing to ensure you're not wasting your time when you're actually at the viewing. So you need to ensure that you're doing comparables and doing that like-for-like analysis, ensuring that the street that your property's on and the comparable street are the same value, and you're not comparing a really posh street to a really low value street. You need to understand the area in depth, like as an area to live in. What are the crime stats? How are the schools? How are the healthcare facilities? What's the leisure facilities like? What's the transport links? What's the rental demand in the area? Go and speak to some letting agents, understand there is enough rental demand. What rent could you charge for that property? Those rental figures can be found from the letting agent that you speak to, and on sites like Rightmove and Open Rent to find comparable rental properties in the area. You can use Zoopla price estimates as well. I found these to be a little bit hit and miss, to be honest. It normally bases it on the last sold price of that property. So if you've got a row of terrace houses, but one hasn't sold for 20 years, but one's only just sold, the one that's just sold will have a much higher value than the one that hasn't sold for 20 years, but they might be the same house. So do take those with a pinch of salt, but they can act as a bit of a guide. You're just doing initial analysis on the property to ensure that you know the rough numbers of the deal and the area is what you expect it to be, and you've done your due diligence there. And you want to be using a deal analyzer here as well to put all of your numbers through to ensure that you're being consistent and following the same process at every deal that you're analyzing. And you're doing all this up front in order to not waste your time and not do lots of viewings that then you realize that, for example, the area is really rough, or the property doesn't value to what you expect it to be. So you're just doing a lot of work up front to save you work further down the line. So the next step is the viewing, doing further due diligence on the property you're looking at, and you're doing it in person now in order to look at the structural integrity of the property and start considering what work it needs doing. What's the condition? Now, just a note here on viewings. Now, this is obviously one that people stumble over. They're kind of like, well, how can I do a viewing if I'm looking at a property 200 miles away? But of course, there are ways and means. I used to work with someone who used to invest in Wales. He lived in London, and he had just built his network up so well in Wales that he found someone that he trusted who was a local agent and got them to do his viewings for him. And they were kind of paid to do that, or he had some kind of arrangement with them. But he'd found someone trusted who knew what they were doing, and that was how he was able to invest in Wales and still do the viewings remotely. Other people I've heard use builders. They find a builder that they can trust and pay them a little bit of their time, and you're kind of killing two birds with one stone getting a builder to do it, because they are able, one, to do the physical inspection of the property that you need to do, but they're also able to provide a kind of quotation and that refurb estimate that you also need to do as part of the viewing. But because they're doing it, you know it's going to be more accurate accurate than if you or someone else that you outsourced it to was doing it. And there are of course agencies out there like Viewer I've used in the past to outsource the viewings to, but do be careful, because as with anything, it's all about your expectations and how you kind of set this up, because the viewing is only as good as the process and the system around that viewing. So for example, if you don't ask someone to do a damp survey on it by using a damp meter, then it's very unlikely you're going to get an accurate understanding of whether the property has damp. If you don't have a checklist in place and then someone misses, I don't know, the back roof or a flat roof, or the fence has fallen down, that's because there's not a checklist in place and they've just missed it because they were chatting to the agent because they weren't as thorough as you wanted them to be, or they're just a little bit inexperienced. So that's just a word of caution, that you need to have that appropriate kind of checklist and system in place, and ensure whoever you're outsourcing the viewing to, or whether you're doing it yourself, that you are then following that process and that checklist to do that viewing, because otherwise you're going to trip yourself up at a later point and you may have missed something, and that means you're going to cause yourself some problems. So the next step is further and final deal analysis. So you want to bring all of the previous due diligence that you did online and the rough numbers that you had, and then all of the things that you learned at the viewing, and you want to bring that together and put it through your deal analyzer and a deal sheet, and then you can work out where you're going to go with this property. Does it meet your requirements? Does it meet your goals? Do you have enough money to purchase it now that you found out how much of a refurb it needs? Can you get a mortgage on it? Are you going to go forward with it? And if you're going to go forward with it, you need to understand what range of purchase price is acceptable. And it's important to go with a range, so you have a low and a high, the high being your max obviously, and you need to have run your numbers based on that range in order to understand the consequences of whether you got it for the high or the low amount, and whether you're happy with that. And this is where you put your refurb costs in, your refurb estimate in, and just generally then double check and triple check all of your numbers, because making any mistakes now is going to really cost you later down the line. If you've got your rental figures wrong, that's really going to affect your returns. If you've got your refurb costs wrong, it might be that you've not got enough money to purchase the deal or to do the refurb. So need to ensure that you've got your numbers right here, because it's very easy to trip yourself up. Guys, if you enjoyed this video today, please do subscribe to our channel, because it really helps us to grow and get more content out to people like yourself. So thanks in advance for your support. The next step is your offer and negotiation. You've got your range of the high and the low you can afford and that you're happy with, and you go through the negotiation either with the vendor or with the agent based on this range. Now, the best thing to do in this negotiation, I would advise in my experience, is to go low. They always say in negotiation, best to shock them first and then kind of work upwards. So go in with your lowest offer, maybe go in below your lowest offer just as a bit of a cheeky offer, and kind of get a sense of where they're at. Maybe even sort of gauging it with them by putting an offer in that's not an offer. So you kind of just say, would you be happy to accept 45,000 if that was the offer that I put forward? You're not actually putting the offer forward, you're just asking the question about would they be happy with that offer. It is a negotiation, and the reason you've got a range is because sometimes you won't always get the property that you want, and then you just got to be prepared to walk away and move on to the next, because ultimately finding deals is all a numbers game and you will get some rejection. So just accept that and kind of walk away. I know that's something that I found difficult at the beginning, because you essentially get quite emotionally attached to deals and you start to think, oh, this is a fantastic deal, and start to sort of think ahead. But that's the wrong attitude to have. You've just got to kind of be objective about it and move on quickly if you don't get the right deal. So the next important step is the refurbishment. I'm not going to cover the legal process or the finance process, because that's often done remotely anyway. It's often that the solicitors and the brokers that people work with are not, their next door neighbor, for example, or their, office in walking distance from their house. They're often people that are based elsewhere in the country. So I'm not going to focus on those, because I think the other points are far more important. So in terms of the refurb, the first thing you've obviously got to find, which is sometimes like finding a needle in a haystack, is a trusted and reputable builder. So where I would start here is looking for referrals. So asking for referrals in your network, asking for referrals in property groups on Facebook or LinkedIn or other social media platforms. Asking local letting agents and estate agents, do they know any builders? Always asking people that are local and building building your network and building referrals that way. Yeah, I've done it in the past successfully, is leaning on those relationships that I've already got and asking for trusted people that way. Just a note on sites like My Builder, which again I've used in the past, but my experience on those, if you're looking at the top rated people on My Builder, which is where you would logically go, in my experience, those people don't tend to need the work because they are top rated builders. They're obviously good at what they do, so they tend to just have a lot of work from that site and across, you know, other clients as well, which means that they are either really busy and can't fit you in for 6 months, or they don't actually get back to you in the first place because you're an unknown client and they haven't just got the capacity to deal with that many sort of leads. But what I would say is, as with anything, even if you're getting a referral, make sure you are doing due diligence on that builder. We've been burnt before with builders and other people we've worked with in property, even through referrals, and the way that we've kind of filtered that out now is through doing more due diligence on that person, even if it is a referral. So make sure you go kind of deep on that, maybe look at their other reviews, maybe ask if you can see some previous work, maybe speak to a previous client. So take it seriously, because obviously this is a fundamental relationship and partnership, and it's very easy to get burnt. And finally, on the refurb, do try to get at least 2 quotes from 2 different builders that you've done all your due diligence on, and then you have got 2 different price points to look at, and you can potentially play them off against each other and see whether there's any wriggle room on the price. So the next step is snagging, and this is snagging of the refurb. So the reason I'm putting this in here is because you're investing remotely, you need to ensure that the work has been done effectively and it's been done to a high standard. And obviously, if you're not there, you're working with a builder that you've not dealt with before, you need to ensure that it's meeting your standards, they're doing what they said they've done, and you're getting what you paid for. So again, make sure you have a checklist and a process here, because again, like the viewing, the quality of the sign off and the snagging is only as good as the checklist that you've got to begin with. So make sure you're testing everything. That's particularly around sort of plumbing. Are there any kind of leaks? Make sure you run the water for a long time. Make sure you test all the appliances, open all the windows and doors. Do they shut and close properly? So you go into that level of detail to make sure you're not going to have any problems further along the line. And again, in terms of who I've got to do this in the past, I've got agents to do this in the past. So that maybe the agent that you're working with on the letting side, or the agent who viewed the property in the first place, or you can use services like Viewbar, and they do sign-offs and property snagging as well. And make sure when you are doing snagging that there is photo evidence of it. So send a series of photos to the builder based on those snags that have been identified, and then ask the builder to then send a series of photos back to prove that those snags have actually been cleared up. And just a final note and a little tip for you, which is when doing snagging, a really effective method for picking out those really small snags that might be really difficult to inform the builder of is to use post-it notes. So particularly around painting, you often can't see some of the minor imperfections, or it'd be really difficult to describe where they are. So using post-it notes and putting the post-it note either on the imperfection or next to the imperfection and maybe writing about it, it's a great way of informing the builder there is a snag. And what I would say is don't do the snagging when the builder's there, because they get offended and they try to rush you as well, and they don't always take the feedback well. So I'd do it in isolation to the builder and then send them the instructions and series of photos after, alongside your post-it notes. So the final key point here is around letting and management. So once you've got that property signed off and snagged, this is all about moving on to the next stage and getting it rented out and getting it making you some money. Now, I know a lot of people try to save cost here and they try to manage the property themselves, but that's very difficult to do if you are hundreds of miles away. I wouldn't recommend either. Even if you're living close by, I wouldn't recommend managing your property to save 100 or maybe 200 pounds, because managing maintenance is a lot of effort, it's a lot of pain, and you need to ensure that you're getting the right tenants to start with and doing all the correct checks. There's a lot of legislation here, so I'd thoroughly recommend going out to an agent and getting them to do all of this and taking it off your hands. In terms of finding a letting agent, again, it's very similar to what I said about builders earlier. Using your network and referrals to get a good letting agent in place, looking at their reviews, and they will take it off your hands. They will do an inventory, so even do a little bit more snagging in case there's anything that was being missed. They will do all of the tenant referencing, they will take photos of the property, they will market the property, they will onboard the tenants, they will take all of that off your hands and make it very much a hands-off experience for you, working with someone that's trusted and is an expert in this, that's local, and that gives you complete peace of mind and really removes the headache of how to look after that property, look after that tenant on an ongoing basis if you are hundreds of miles away. And just on maintenance, I know a lot of people worry about being ripped off through maintenance. So one thing that agents normally put in is a clause around a minimum amount of refurb costs that they have to notify you. So it's normally around £150. So they can get the work done without having to notify you because it's just easier for them. But if you want to reduce that and actually be kept more in the loop and be notified of even the small items, you can do, and you could take that down to 0 if you wanted and you didn't mind a disturbance. But you could also insert a clause to say that they have to get a number of different quotes to ensure that you're getting a competitive price for any maintenance work that needs doing. So as you can see, it is very much possible to be able to invest remotely, but it's very much dependent on having trusted relationships in place, having a series of processes and checklists in place, and doing thorough due diligence at each stage. But what remote investing allows you to do is to get the benefits of investing elsewhere in the country, particularly if you're living in the south where you've got low yields. You can invest in the north, getting high yields and better cash flow, and particularly at the moment, deals that actually will positively cash flow rather than negatively cash flow like they will do in the south. So you get all of the benefits of investing, but you don't have to do it on your doorstep, and you're not restricted to doing it where you live, because that is a big myth. If you follow my steps, you can be successful in remote property investing. So good luck, guys, and let me know how it goes. Thanks for watching today, guys. Really appreciate it. If you can do me a favor, which is to subscribe to our channel and to like this video, all your support does really help us.